Welcome to Discover the Difference, a podcast brought to you by C3. My name's Jamie Reed, and I'll be your host today, along with my buddy who has a little more hair than me, Gabriel Earl. Today we have Dave Sanderson on the show, and he's just full of inspiration. He's most well known for being one of the last passengers off the Miracle on Hudson after helping everybody else off the plane in freezing cold water. But his story doesn't start there, doesn't even end there. He became the head of security for Tony Robbins, and the story of how he even came to work for Tony and advance all the way up to become his head of security is so inspirational, right up to the moment that Tony calls him in and essentially fires him, tells him, hey, it's time for you to pursue your dream and your passion. And he launches his own leadership and consulting company following in Tony's footsteps. As somebody who embraces, endorses the books that he's published, you're just going to find so much to love about Dave and take away as inspiration to apply in your lives. So enjoy this episode. I think Bun was telling me a story about you that you didn't train for that swim in the Hudson, did you, with the Navy SEALs?
Is that a 3-mile swim?
I learned to swim in 1966, and the last time I really swam was 1979. So when Suzanne asked if I wanted to swim with her in the Hudson River, I'm like, I need more information. So I actually went from not swimming since 1979 in 100 days to swim the Hudson River with the SEALs.
Holy smoke. So you trained for 100 days and then you swim 3 miles with a bunch of Navy SEALs.
That's correct.
Did they have to catch up to you, or how did that work? They were following you?
No, not quite. Suzanne is a tremendous wingman. She and I still stayed. I think we finished 5th from the back. But you know what? It's about finishing, right? It's not about speed.
Right.
Because my swimming partner this year, last weekend, she's a champion swimmer. And she can swim like nobody's business, and I'm slow and steady guy. So,
well, I mean, swimming 3 miles any way you do it is a major accomplishment. I mean, that is running 3 miles is a lot for some people. Doing it in the water is, that's big.
Well, that's, we did a mile run, including push-ups, and then the swim, doing push-ups, and a mile run at the end. So yeah, it was 2 miles of running, 3.1 miles of swimming. I did not do the pull-ups. I did 22 push-ups at each stop when they were doing 100. So.
Oh my gosh. How many people participated in this?
I think this year the number was 201. I think last year was 188. I think this year was like 200 or 201.
Wow.
So what was the
impetus out there in the water? Yeah.
What was the impetus to make this all happen? Like to get involved in this, to go back to the Hudson and swim?
Well, last year was a different motivation, to be very candid. Yes, I wanted to raise money for the veterans who are falling hard at times. I got a passion for the military. But last year was more about going back to the Hudson River where I almost lost my life and getting redemption. That was last year's motivation. This year's motivation was to see how much I improved, but more, how could I support and raise more money? And take somebody who had not been an open water swimmer, my swim buddy, into a body of water, which is extremely challenging. So it was, and I love being around the guys. SEAL guys tell people, one of the things about SEALs, as you may know, they hold you to a higher standard. And It helps me raise my standard. And I can show people and I can think one part of my talk now is how to go from 0 to swing with the SEALs in 100 days. How do you do that? Right?
How do you?
I share the strategy on how I did it. And part of that is how to raise your standard.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we want to dig into that, but just to kind of go back to the listeners that don't know about, the Miracle on the Hudson. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then also that kind of feeds into the redemption part that you went back to, after that experience.
Yeah, thank you. So, it's the short version of a long story is I wasn't supposed to be on that plane. I got off work. We were working in a distribution center in Brooklyn, New York. That one opened up at 2:00 in the morning. So we wanted to be in the middle of all the action because we were looking at their systems. So we started our day about 5 o'clock. So we got done about 10. And I'm like, I get to go home early. So I gave up my first class seat at 5 o'clock for C15A on 1549 that afternoon. And nothing unusual, as you know, if you know the story, nothing unusual about the takeoff, but about 60 seconds in is when we heard the explosion. Definitely got my attention because I was not paying attention. I mean, one thing I did not, I fly 100 times a year. I know everything, right? You know everything until you don't know anything. But then, fortunately, we had a captain. He did an amazing job. I'll be forever grateful. But the captain who had the skill sets to glide an Airbus because he had no power, and we're heading straight towards the George Washington Bridge. And fortunately, he missed the bridge by 400 feet.
Wow.
But now you go nose diving into the Hudson River, 36-degree water, 11-degree day. And I don't know about you, I've never seen another plane crash that survived everybody.
What was the atmosphere like as this all unfolds?
It was very
Like, how much time did you have too? Like in between the time that you knew that things were not going right and when it happened?
Approximately
hit the
6
Hudson.
minutes. So 6 minutes, which goes by. It takes an hour to go 6 minutes. I mean, it's how slow time goes. But the plane was eerily silent. I mean, you talk to other passengers, they'll tell you the same thing. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Wow. And I learned from another captain why that probably happened. It's because of the passenger makeup of the plane. And that came to me. I actually was flying from probably 3 or 4 weeks after this from Orlando to Charlotte. And I was in first class. I was getting some privileges. Yes, they were bumping me up. And I got to talk to the captain. He gave me this insight that he said, look around you. He said, what kind of passengers are flying this plane from Orlando? Families, kids, older people, and a few business people. He said, your passenger makeup was 180 degrees different in New York. 90% of our business people who can usually make decisions and act quickly. And he said, that's probably why this thing turned out the way it did. Because once the captain got it, he gets all the credit getting into the water, but once it's in the water, it's a team effort. It is a total team effort. It's not just one person. And I think that contributed to a lot of what happened that day, because I think if we haven't had a different passenger makeup, it would have been a lot different.
Was there people that you noticed in that really stepped up, or did you feel like everybody did, or what was that? Were there certain people that said, hey, we got to help everybody out. Let's work together. Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I think one thing is leaders step up in times of crisis, and definitely there were some leaders that stepped up. And I'll give you an example. On the right side of the plane is where I went out. I went out at 10F on the right side of the plane. And the difference between the right side of the plane and the left side of the plane was dramatic, because the right side of the plane, we didn't have any crew managing the door. Passengers had to manage the door, had to manage the exit with zero training. All the crew went out the left side of the plane. So they had that experience, but they had another issue. The left side of the plane was facing towards Manhattan, and that's where a majority, if not all, of the Aquaman and the helicopters were coming in, right? And the rotors were knocking people in the water. So they had a lot of people going in and out of the water a lot more. But people had to step up on the right side of the plane to lead. And that was a dramatic difference of how it turned out. Totally two different stories of how the rescue went.
So in this 6 minutes, are they educating all the passengers of what steps are going to happen after you crash land in a body of water, or everybody just activates?
No. The only thing you heard was brace, brace, brace. That's all you heard.
Oh, is it a hard landing?
It's coming down, right? You're about 30 seconds, and all you heard was brace, brace, brace. And after that, it was game on. Because water started filling the plane immediately. The backside of the plane hit first, and that ripped wide open, so water started coming in immediately. So depending where you were on that plane, I was on 15A towards the back. Water was about knee deep when I got up. In the back of the plane, it was about chest level deep.
Wow.
Oh my
People
gosh.
were trying to swim. People were trying to swim out.
Different dynamic you got to deal with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you, from the people that led, how did they lead? To help people, as far as saving their lives and directing them on, where to go or what to do?
Well, some people helped on the wing, getting people moved out on the wing. I think those leaders stepped up on there. What I did is I went towards the back of the plane, see if anybody needed help, and they were moving pretty well, but I just got behind everybody else, and to make sure that there was nobody left in the back of the plane. And the water, that's why I know the water was about chest deep, because I was chest deep in 36-degree water. But as I was trying to get out on the right side of the plane, I was getting out like everybody else. But the boats and the wing were already filled up. And that's why I was inside the plane for roughly 7 minutes, waist deep in 36-degree water. But how leaders stepped up, what I did is, one of the things that happened on our side, on the right side of the plane, there was a lady and she wasn't moving. She was standing in the middle of the wing and she wasn't moving. And I believe she was probably in shock, scared, whatever kind of mentality, right?
Yeah.
But when you're going so fast and this thing's going down, the plane's sinking, you got to move. There's no time to be standing around watching what's going on. So all the training that I've had is when you get somebody in that situation, you got to do something dramatic to break them out of it. So I started yelling at this lady. She didn't know who I was. I started yelling at her, but I got her attention. And she looked at me like, who's this old guy yelling at me? But then somebody grabbed her arm and pulled her on the boat. And all of a sudden you see people walking down a wing. So I think you had to lead using the things that you learned. And one of the things the captain said was exactly correct. The leaders on the plane, all the things that you learned in your life, you had to cash in that one moment, right?
All at once.
You had to cash everything at one time and just put it all out. It's like going in Vegas, right? You're going all in. And hopefully it's going to go well. Sometimes it doesn't, but fortunately for all of us, the leaders who put it all in, scored well.
What was it that that from your past experience in your past life that drove you to, go to the back of the plane versus go straight to the exit and get the heck out of there? What was it that, led you that way?
Exactly what happened. When I was exiting. My game plan, once we were in the water and I saw that I was just, aisle up out. In my mind, I said, aisle up out, man, aisle up out, aisle up out. But when I got to the aisle, that's what changed for me, because I heard my mom start talking in my head. And my mom passed away in 1997, but there was something I kept hearing in my head that she would tell me when I was young. It was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you.
Mm.
And
That's awesome.
to me, the right thing was you take care of other people first. I grew up in a small town. Everybody knew your name. It was like Mayberry, right? Everybody knows who you are. But you took care of everybody. So that's why I climbed over the seats to go towards the back of the plane. And because if I didn't hear that, I probably would have gone out like everybody else. And someone asked me, I said, how you would have felt that? I was like, well, you know what? You got to do what you got to do, right? So, maybe leaving would have been the smart thing to do. But, there were people in the back of the plane. We found an older lady in the back row that didn't want to move. She wanted to die in the plane. And fortunately, there was a lady back there that basically grabbed her arms and pulled her out of the seat and started moving, pushing her. And I was right behind them, right? Going behind them. So there were heroes like that all over the plane.
Oh, that's amazing. We do breath work with youth athletes, and how we teach them to apply using breath work in a time of trauma is by putting them in 48-degree water, because it takes your breath away. It literally sucks it out of you and puts you into a state of panic. And then you have to learn how to apply breathing to it, right? So here you guys are in 36-degree water, involuntarily dealing with these conditions. What element did that cold play in how all this unfolded?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I tell you the moment where what you just said hit me, because I was moving so quickly, right? I had adrenaline, and that's what the EMTs kept telling me. Because I shouldn't be alive. I was in the water for 7 minutes, right? And then I swam to the closest boat that I could find. So I was head deep in water. So I was moving on adrenaline. But when I got on the ferry, because I couldn't even climb, I kept yelling, I can't. And then all of a sudden, 2 guys grabbed my arms and pulled me on the ferry. And then I'm rolling on the ice in the ferry. They said, get up. I get up. And all of a sudden, you're thinking, wow, I made it, right? I made it. And that's the moment it hit me, because the adrenaline was down. Air temperature was 11 degrees. I've been in the water for an extended amount of time, and I had to manage my mind and had to manage my breath. And the way I learned that is not only through swimming young, but when I got in panic situations, I used to be the head of security for a guy by the name of Tony Robbins. I've been a lot
Never heard of him. Never heard of that guy.
I don't know if you know who he is, right? Some people still don't know who he is, but I was in a lot of high leverage situations where I had to manage my mind, right?
Yeah.
And so part of that is what we just talked about, managing your breath, right?
Yeah.
Did you ever walk through Coles? Did he ever have you walk through Coles, Tony Robbins?
I've only done that about 100 plus times. I was there. I was on the security team when we did the world record, fire walk in Kona. So yeah, I've done it many times, and that's about managing your mind too, right? It's not about the cold; it's about managing your mind.
Yeah.
So,
Well, why don't we use that as a transition and go back, because a mutual friend, Vun, introduced us. We didn't know you prior to the podcast, and when we're looking at some of your credentials, it kind of starts around Tony Robbins security on your LinkedIn. How do you get into that industry and come to work with that organization and him specifically?
well, thank you for that question, because it actually started back in 1984. And this is how I made my way to what we're talking about. I had a mentor that came into my life right after college. His name was Bill. And I was the second assistant restaurant manager at a place called Howard Johnson. My dad told me, kick me out of the house after 30 days, and you got to get a job. And that was the job I got. And fortunately, though, I was working second and third shift because I was a low man on the totem pole. But this guy named Bill Bonney would come in every night and have ice cream and coffee, and we'd talk. And fast forward, I found out Bill owned over 80 movie theaters and restaurants in North and South Carolina in his life. He was a multimillionaire. And he started mentoring me on December 24th, 1984. So for about 13 years, he was teaching me the mindset of success. But this is where it leads to the question you just asked. Because Bill passed away in September of 1997. And I was on Tony's security team, but that's a couple of months when Tony asked me to be the assistant head of security. And how that happened was I was there to serve. I was attending his events like everybody, walking on fire, putting down brochures, right? I was there to serve because I wanted to be around that energy. But one night, it was late at night, and I was putting down brochures with some other people, and all of a sudden I saw his former wife. She was talking to two gentlemen, and she looked uneasy. She wanted to move, right? So all I did is go up to her and said, ma'am, your husband needs you in the back. That's all I said. And I started walking her back. She goes, you handled that really well. So well, thank you very much. She goes, would you like to be on security? It's a lot better than putting brochures down, right? So she put me as security in the green room for Mr. Robbins that next day. That's how I began, sitting there just watching and listening. And he started getting trust in me. And I started growing through that organization to the point where I was head of security, managing the entire security and his security around the world.
You mentioned Bill as your mentor and from '84. Can you talk about how that was significant in your life and what you believe mentors mean to people?
Well, thank you. Because you see the book in the back, From Turmoil to Triumph. I'm just releasing this book. This is what this book's about. It's about the power of mentorship and how important. Even Tony does a nice testimonial on the cover about how Jim Rohn was his mentor and how important it is, and how he was my mentor after Bill left and passed on. I think it's not only helped me accelerate, but I think everybody needs somebody there who can give them the level set, give them direction, but more important, give them wisdom. And see, one of the things I'm finding is the people that I coach and mentor is, I love speaking to millennials and younger people. They're extremely intelligent, but they think they got wisdom, and it takes time to get wisdom. You got to go through a lot of experiences in your life to understand what's really going on. So one of the things that Bill imparted on me is his wisdom over that 13-year period. And this is what this book's about, is the wisdom he taught me. But what was more interesting in the story as it came out was my mom and dad taught me the same things when I was a kid. But I didn't listen to them. They were I was too close. So the answer to the question is this. Sometimes you need somebody else on the outside, right, who can give you some perspective, who wants you to win, but can give you a different sort of take on it. So all of a sudden maybe register in a different way. And that's the power of mentorship. Every great leader in this country right now, in this world, has had somebody who's taken interest in them. And it may be the guy down the street or the gal who's working at the cash register, but they've got wisdom. And that's what it's all. I think and Bill left me this before he passed away. It's my responsibility. It's your responsibility to find somebody to mentor. You have to find somebody to mentor to leave it to the next generation. And that's what this book's about. Because I vowed to him that I would not let his wisdom die. That's the last thing he asked me to do, is not let it die. And I'm not going to let it die. And that's what I do. And that's why I did the SEAL swim, to show people, get that experience, like how you can do something, right? At 61 years old, going back, facing your fears.
Did Bill find you? Did Bill find you, or did you find him?
He kept coming into the restaurant, and I was an assistant manager, and I served him ice cream and coffee, and he and his wife. And in those days, guys, that you could sit back at the booth and have a cold one, and light up a heater and have a conversation, right? And Bill passed away of lung cancer because he smoked unfiltered Camel since 1929. So it caught up.
That'll do it.
He just come in and just start talking, right? Start talking, and one of the things that I learned is sometimes it's better to listen, right?
Yep.
Love that.
Yeah, absolutely. What I want to ask a question. You referenced millennials. When we're out talking with other business leaders, you often hear people say, "Oh, millennials, like they're so difficult." And you spoke about it from this really positive perspective. Super intelligent. They're driven by technology. They understand all that. And then you bridged it with the wisdom piece. So for business owners who are listening to this, how do they engage millennials in a positive way where you use that energy and knowledge, but they lack the wisdom to help them see that? Because we all know millennials are kind of those, they show up as entry level and want to be president in a year. How do you manage that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because one of the people that I am friends with is an expert on millennials, and he taught me some things about how I could use some of the skill sets that I've learned. Because one of the things that I learned about millennials is, you're exactly right. I have two daughters who are millennials. My first one thought she could go for the entry level to and pick up the phone and talk to the president right now, the company, right? Skip everybody else. Oh, by the way, I got bored, right? So I left the company, right? And I'm like, I was like freaking out a little bit. So, but one of the things I've learned about working and talking to millennials is they're all looking at what's their mission in life. Why are they here, right? So I think if I'm a business leader, and I look to hire millennials. I'm trying to hire somebody in every generational bracket, so I have that crossbred. But one of the things when I talk to millennials and interview millennials is, I want to understand, do you understand, when you know what your mission is, why are you here on earth? What's most important to you? And so I think once I start getting in their minds a little bit, they understand, I don't know what I want to be. I don't even know why I'm here. Why don't you let me help you? If you come work with me, I'll help you with guiding you with your mission. You support me in what you need to do in this job, and we'll all win, and I'll help you get to where you want to be. So I think that's the way I handle millennials, and the people that I have seen who are successful, that's the way they handle it. They set boundaries, but they also help them understand their big picture mission, help them get to that next level.
Yeah, that's great. So you're really trying to help give them a path for their purpose and their mission.
Yeah, I really admit it. If not Gen Z, millennials are the smartest people on earth. I mean, they grew up with technology. They got it, right? And they can dance around all of us with this stuff. But when it comes to making a crisis situation, right, or something needs to happen, and all of a sudden, this is one of the reasons I think COVID was so devastating. I don't think it was as devastating on my generation, because one of the things about my generation is we went through the Vietnam War. We saw the race riots in 1968. We went through gas crunch in 1974. Like my dad told me, he went through the Depression, right? We have seen this before, right? Millennials they were born right in that era where 9/11 was happening, but they really understand what 9/11 was. So they don't have a point of reference. So when this thing hit, the challenge, and this is one of the things I talked about, is it wasn't just about COVID. It was about the police situation, social justice, right? All the election that kept going on and on. You can't even talk to somebody about politics. And things started to stack on these folks, and they don't know how to get out of it. You know, so I hope we give them a map. Help them understand there is a map, you know, a massive action plan that you can get yourself out of it. And this is why I think one of the things that it's incumbent on me and people who have gone through something like this to help this generation, if they want to, there is a way out of this. It wasn't just about COVID.
Well, you touched on the mentorship and how important it is, and obviously it's a passion of yours. You wrote a book about it that's coming out. Excited to read that. But how do you impart that on millennials who, you know, do feel like they know a lot, that mentorship is important to them?
Are you saying they're know-it-alls?
Not saying that they're know-it-alls, but
It sounded like that.
But you know, that's where that's something that you're stressing towards, is this mentorship. How do you help them, you know, see that, hey, they can impart that wisdom from somebody that, you know, can be a mentor?
I'll give you an example, because this was a organization sort of mixed between Gen Z and millennials. All right. It was actually a very good audience. It's one of the younger audiences that I've been with. And what I really did is I used my learning how to swim story. I told a story to them how I learned and the 5 things that I had to do. And all of a sudden I saw the light bulbs going off, right? They saw that there is a pathway. Because I laid out a pathway for them 100 days on how I got from 0 to that. And these 5 steps. And all of a sudden, this is the first time I ever spoke in this sort of way, because I was like, I'm not going to get to them by my traditional way. You know, when I speak to, you know, Gen X and baby boomers, they get it, right? So I told them this story, how I had to humble myself, right? I had to go to 0, sort of like you are right now, right? I had to figure this thing out. I had to figure that, you know, I had to put the massive action plan together. You know, I had to understand the mission. I had to find, and this is the big one for them. And I had to find my who for my how. Because there's a lot of things I had to get done, but I couldn't do them all. So I had to find the right people, the who's. And I surrounded myself with who's, who became my mentors. That was step number 2. And all of a sudden, that's when the light bulbs started going off. And then the 3rd step is you got to put together a massive action plan. But then you have to have focused execution. You can't deviate, right? Yeah, you can dabble, but, you know, if you dabble, you know, I could show you how to compress decades into days. But if you over here and dabble, you go outside of this, it's going to take you a lot longer. But the 5th step is what I learned in the river last year. This is the one that I talk about in the book. It's all about gratitude. Giving thanks to something bigger than yourself. Humbling yourself. And those are the 5 steps that I use. So to answer your question, when I shared this story on how I did it step by step, and how I had to learn how to swim at 60 years old again, I think they started getting it. So that's how I would do it. I would relate a story that I think kids would understand stories. They want the steps, but if you can give them a real life experience on how you did it and lay it out with entertainment, right? You got to entertain, because they'll buzz out on it.
I love the gratitude piece.
They'll buzz out on it.
Yeah, we talk about gratitude a lot. I love that you tie that element into it. You know, you were talking about going from serving at Tony Robbins' organization to becoming part of the security team and then the head of the security team. I feel like you might have glossed over some details there on getting introduced that first day by the wife to becoming the head of it. How does that transpire?
I'll tell you exactly how it cost me a little bit, I have to admit. Not financially. Yeah, it cost me financially, but more time away from my family. And because I committed, once I started, I committed I would show up. He asked me one time, he said, can you be in LA? Right? It's like 3 days from now, because he needed somebody. This is just on the team. wasn't a leader. I was nothing. I said, yeah, Tony, I'll be there for you, right? And I showed up for him in LA from Charlotte, North Carolina, to be there. So I left my job that day. I left my family, flew to LA, came back on the overnight, right? Because I wanted to be with my family. So it did cost me some time because that's when my kids were growing. And that's one of the biggest regrets that I have. I probably should have geared back, but I committed to him that I would be there for him. And so he had certainty in me. So he knew if he needed something, like I'll give you an example. We were in Australia. I was the assistant head of security at that point. He said, you want to go play golf? All right. I was the only golfer on the security team. He said, I need clubs. He didn't have any clubs. And we're in Brisbane, Queens, Australia, Queensland, wherever that is, right? So I had to figure it out, right? So where do I go in Brisbane to get custom-made clubs for a 6'7" guy? I didn't even know what I'm talking about, right? And I figured it out. I brought these clubs back. I paid for them out of my own pocket. I got reimbursed, which was very nice. But that also shows that, you know what? I can count on him to do something and get it done, right? So it's all about certainty. And that's what I think all these things that I did gave him certainty to the point where when it was time to replace the other gentleman who'd been there for a long time, it was like, I know he can handle it, right? I know he'll show up. And that's what leaders are looking for. They're looking for people who can give them certainty. And leaders give certainty.
Very simple, right? But it's very simple, but not a lot of people understand it.
Right, exactly.
I like it. Well, going back to that, because I know that you do a lot of with PTSD and help people that have experienced it. And I'm guessing that, we started with this idea of you going back last year to do the swim. Did you feel like you had PTSD, some type of it? And how did you overcome that to, go back and get that redemption?
Good question. I never knew or thought that I ever had PTSD. I know there were moments I would wake up in the middle of the night and, all of a sudden things would flash in my head. But what really came to light for me was probably 3 or 4 years after. And this was right before the movie came out. And I was approached by AARP magazine. They wanted to interview me. And I said, why? I'm young. Well, am I going to tell a bunch of old people they don't already know, right? And they said, there's 2 universities that have been doing a study on you and how you grew out of a traumatic life event compared to other people on that plane, including some of the leadership. What did you do differently? So I did this interview with AARP magazine. And I shared the strategies on how I grew out of a traumatic life event instead of going into a depressed state, which then turned into a TED Talk, which then turned into, wow, there is a way to grow. It's called post-traumatic growth syndrome. Now people are starting to talk about this subject. But I don't ever think I went into that depression or even deep depression. I just think I used the skill sets that I had to be able to take it in a different direction, where other people still haven't got back on a plane yet. See, fortunately for me, I went back on the plane the next day. Now, people say
it's pretty quick.
That's the expression of getting back on the horse.
Exactly. So to answer your question about going back into the river, it's the same analogy. I had to go back. Even though I didn't fear the river, it was like, okay, if I go back and face it this time, what's most important, leave on my terms. It's one of the things I learned from my dad, Bill, Tony, always try to leave on your own terms. This last year was about leaving on my own terms.
Wow.
I like that.
I like that. So can you talk a little bit about, because you mentioned that there's the strategy that you took. Is that to leave on your own terms, or is there additional strategies when you did that TED Talk on how you overcame this, this PTSD you experienced and turned it into this PTGT or how you're calling it?
PTGS.
PTGS, thank you.
In my TED Talk, they only give you 17 minutes, so you got to roll, right? So I only laid out a couple. But the one that I think is most important, even though there's a few other things that I did, was I reframed the meaning of the plane crash. Because meaning equals emotion, emotion equals your life. Whatever meaning you attach to something is what your life is. And that really came to me shortly after the plane crash. I knew it, intellectually, but then when I visualized it and saw it in person, and it happened in the green room of Good Morning America. We just got done being interviewed, myself, a bunch of passengers, the crew, all that stuff, right? And we were in this, it got done, and all of a sudden, we're back in the green room, and this one passenger just started yelling for no reason. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with this guy, right? I mean, we survived the plane crash. We're on national TV. What's wrong, right? What's up with this guy? Well, then what I found out is he was going through a divorce and he lost his job. So the meaning he attached to the plane crash was devastation. The meaning I attached it was a blessing because it gave me a whole different perspective to be able to help people. Same situation, two different meanings, two different pathways for our life. So one of the things that I do when people, I get this call maybe once or twice a year, you got to talk to this guy or gal, right? You got to talk to them right now. First thing I talk about is what meaning they're attaching to this situation. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was actually in my car driving back from speaking down in Georgia. I got a call from a friend, said, you got to talk to this young lady. She's locked in a cabin in northern Ontario. She won't come out. She just survived the avalanche over Nepal, and she was one of the 4 survivors. She will not come out. You got to talk to her. I was like, what can I talk to her about, right? I've never been in an avalanche, right? But I've been in a plane crash, right? Because everybody's got their personal plane crash experiences, like an avalanche. Yep. So I talked to her, and I found out the meaning was, why did I live and everybody else died? And she couldn't get over it. She had survivor guilt. So I told her, I told my friend, I said, give me a couple weeks, all right? Let me sort of get my head together on this. So through my network, I had a network that I found somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody in Ethiopia. And I talked to this young man. And this young man every day had to get up, go get water for his family, right? He wore sandals. He didn't have any shoes. So, okay. So I arranged a 3-way, actually it was a 4-way phone call with the lady in Ontario, my friend, this guy in Ethiopia, and me. And I says, could you tell her your story? He told her what he had to do every day just to survive. So I used the power of contrast. So, you think you're having a bad day, right? This guy every day has got to scratch just to get some food for his family. And all of a sudden, I could hear it in her tone of voice. Because you know what? Maybe I did survive for a different reason, right? And then I told her what happened to me on an interview in Montreal 3 or 4 days after the plane crash. And the question came to me was, why do you think, I was actually a month, because remember the plane crash in Buffalo where everybody died? I did this interview and they asked me, why do you think they died and you lived? I'm on national TV in Canada. And I'm like, whoa, I'm ready for that one. I said, maybe it just wasn't my time. Maybe I have a different mission. And I think putting all that together, I gave her a different meaning for Nepal. That she has a reason for living. Now, I don't know where she is in the last few years, but I knew at least in that moment, she understood, right? All right, maybe I'm here for a different reason. Maybe I don't have it that bad, right? I think so the power of meaning and contrast, I use all these skill sets to help people.
Well, it sounds like after, that traumatic experience, what you did is, it almost sounds like you accept that you were intentionally put there, rather than it just be happenstance or something that happened to me. It's like purposeful, so that then you can incorporate, meaning into that.
That's a very good distinction. That's exactly what I believe.
That's pretty cool.
I believe that I was put there for a reason and a purpose. I wasn't supposed to be on that plane, right? I wasn't. I scheduled on the 5 o'clock flight, and all of a sudden I'm there in the middle of something, right? Maybe all of us were on that plane for a reason. And when I talked to that captain in Orlando, he sort of gave me that perspective. Maybe all those passengers that day were in the seats they were supposed to be in that moment, because no one freaked out. People help people. Everybody had a common mission. I think I was supposed to be on that plane for a reason. And whether it was to help other people that day or maybe help a bigger mission, I've used it to be able to help other people and fulfill the promise I made to Bill, my mentor, that I would not let what he taught me die. And I think that's the big reason, is because I had not fulfilled that promise. One of the things my dad taught me is you're only good as your word. So maybe that's one of the reasons I didn't die that day, is because I had fulfilled that promise.
Well, so it looks like you leave the Tony Robbins organization, a couple years after that event. Can you talk us through making that decision and why you did it?
Great question. It wasn't my decision. I was in Chicago with Tony. We were doing a fire walk that night, and he called me into a suite. And I'd been talking to Tony over those last few years, right? We were having some really intimate one-on-one talks, and I was trying to get some coaching on media and things like that because I don't know how to handle this stuff, right? He called me into a suite and said, you know what? Maybe it's time for you to go out and do your own thing. It's time now. You need to cut the cord. You need to do this and don't look back. Burn the boats, right? Burn the boats and just do it. He said, I'm going to find somebody else to take this over. I'm going to give you the opportunity to do it yourself. So he actually, that Friday night in Chicago, gave me the freedom, because I was holding on to that, because you know what? I was there to serve, but I had a different mission now. I had a different mission. And he knew that. He recognized that. And I think he intentionally cut my cord so I could be forced to do that. And that's what happened. So I still, to this day, you're right, I say he wrote a nice testimonial for my book. He and I are still friends today, and I call him a close friend. And he mentioned me for those years. But sometimes you have to have somebody cut the cord for you, right? Because maybe you're just hanging on because that's your certainty, right?
Did he tell you he's cutting your cord, or he was just hey, it's time, it's your time?
It's basically it's your time. Go do it. Because one of the things about it, inside baseball, is every time I pick him up at the helipad or the airport or car, right? He'd ask me how things are going. He's still working for that company. And I said, yeah. He goes, why? Why? Go out on your own. And I would give him excuses. And one of the things you don't do to Tony is give him excuses, because he can bat him down pretty quick, right? He can knock him down, man. So finally got to a point where I had to have more excuses, right? And it's like, it's like, you got to do this. He says, you got to be on your own. It's the only real freedom you have is ever going to work for yourself and build it yourself. He said, I know it's scary, but you can do it. You have the skill sets. And when Tony sort of gets in your grill, right? But he does it with love, right? He does it with love. So he's coming from his heart. And he always told me, always come from your heart in everything you do. And that's what I do. I try to come from my heart with people when I have to be straight with them and tell them, hey, let me sort of tell you where the 411 really is, right? So it was a great night. I look back that night, I was sort of like thinking, like, why are we doing this? But it was a great night for me.
So what's day one like after you take that advice from Tony? Like, where do you start?
First thing I did, it wasn't day one, it was probably week 2. But that general getting my head straight and doing all this is I hired my first EA, Tammy. I needed a wingman. I needed somebody because I'm really good at driving revenue. That was what I did for 30 years, right? I wasn't good at all the other crap, right? And I needed somebody to have my back. So I hired Tammy. Tammy came on with me pretty much 20 hours a week or more when I needed her. And she would handle all that stuff so I could just focus on driving revenue, marketing Dave, trying to figure this thing out, right? So it gave me the leverage in the runway. And that's why I coach people. I say, a lot of people go out and try to do it themselves now, and they're by themselves, don't have anybody, or don't think they can afford anybody to do it. You can't afford not to do it, because you need to have that runway to think, and so you can research and know what you need to go to, your pathway. But so if you're doing that and the administration and the marketing and all these other things, you can't focus.
Pivoting a little bit, I see what looks like an American Red Cross behind your head. And little birdie told me you've raised almost $15 million for them over the years. Can you just talk about like where the passion for that comes from, and How does somebody decide to raise that amount of, that's significant. How do you go about that?
Well, it really started that day on the Hudson River because I had 3 Red Cross experiences. When I got to shore in New Jersey, when they gave me a blanket, when they gave me clothes when I had no clothes in the hospital. When I got back to Charlotte, the CEO of the Red Cross here in Charlotte was taking care of my family. So I wanted to give back to them. So that CEO, her name was Pam, called me and asked me if I would speak at her local fundraiser. And all of a sudden, 200 people show up. I don't know what I'm going to say, right? But I talk. And I got to their hearts, and they raised a lot of money that day, right? So all of a sudden, I started getting invited to speak at other Red Cross events. But what really sort of transformed and really sort of allowed me to help them on a bigger scale is when I got invited to go to Washington, D.C. and speak for their national convention, and that night at the Supreme Court. And wow. I got to share my story to 400 of the Tiffany Circle ladies, who are ladies who donate a significant amount of money. And we raised $6 million that night.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So is that where you started to get to that place of like, hey, I can be a speaker and I want to get into the speaking business? I mean, because obviously you've seen Tony Robbins do it and very successfully.
Yeah, and one thing Tony told me, and I did the ZigZiglar approach. The first 70 events that I didn't take a dime. I just practiced and practiced and practiced, right? Until I got it down in here. So it's in my heart. So I can walk on stage without notes and deliver. But what happened, so part 2 of that night in Washington, D.C., I was being watched by a couple of speaking bureaus. One was based in Washington, D.C. So I called Bill up, said, Bill, if you want to come see me speak, I'm over here at the Supreme Court. If you want to come with me, be my guest, right? And he saw me speak. He saw the impact that I had. He said, we sign you right now. I said, what does that mean? We want to market you and we'll pay you. Really? You pay for this stuff, right? Yeah. Wow. It's a good gig, right? So that's how that happened, right? He knew who I was introduced to him, but I invited him to hear me in Washington, D.C. And all of a sudden now I'm getting paid to speak all over the country, now all over the world. But then, I grew to a point where it's not that I didn't need them anymore, but I outgrew them, right? I'm to the point now where people will call me directly. It's like, why am I paying them 25%, right? Even though I still love my speaking bureau friends, I love them. So that's how that changed. That's how it started, right? Then that night, it was sort of like the transformation. And because, if you average out my events, when I would walk into an event or they'd ask me to speak, we were going to raise close to $100,000 that night, that day. Wow. That was my average. So
that's awesome.
I could go to Fargo, North Dakota and raise that, or I could go to Dallas, Texas and, raise that or more. And people know that I would deliver for them, and I never accepted a cent from the Red Cross except for expenses.
That's
amazing.
This book back here, Moments Matter, I gave 10% of that taking of that revenue back to the Red Cross, which is a part of the 14.7 million.
Can you tell us a little bit about Moments Matter and what, for people that are listening, so that they can pick it up?
That's my first book. And it's really about the mindset and the skills I had to use that day to survive the plane crash. I talk about the 12 sort of skills and strategies I had to do and what I really learned from that experience. But how it was interesting because the book wasn't going to be called Moments Matter until I got a phone call of where I'm sitting right here from my wife. And she called me, and I was in here doing some things about running the book. She goes, a couple of our neighbors, they needed some help getting the TV on. They called, can you go down and help them get your TV worked out? Now, these were 2 older ladies, and they needed some help. And I don't know where y'all grew up. I grew up in a small town where everybody helped everybody, especially your elders, right? And they're your neighbors. So I go down there, I get your TV fixed pretty quick, and they're like, would you like to stay for milk and cookies? No, I love milk and cookies. I love them. Well, if someone's going to bake me milk and cookies, I'm all in, right? Especially older ladies, you could probably bake. So they're in there getting their cookies ready to go, right? And I'm sitting down south. We got these things called parlors, right? Sitting rooms, right? So I'm in the sitting room or parlor, and they have all these books, and they basically a lot of history book about World War II. I'm like, this is I've never seen these, right? I love history. I'm looking through these books, like, woo, I've never seen these things. And they came out and said, hey, where did you get these books? Because I want to buy some, right? They both looked at me and rolled up their sleeves and showed me the letters and numbers down their arm. Oh, whoa. They survived the concentration camp.
Wow.
And I said, tell me the story. So about 2-3 hours, I heard this story, how they survived concentration camp when the rest of their family died. And they vowed to stay together the rest of their lives. They were 77 years old.
That's awesome.
So I came back to where I'm sitting right now. I said, I got it. They made all their moments in their life matter from that experience. And this is what this experience is about. I'm going to make all your moments. I'm making all these moments matter, and you too can too. If you just do the right things, right? And that's what this book's about. Is if you do these things and do the right things, you'll make all the moments in your life matter. And that's how the book came about.
That's so cool.
That's amazing.
That's great. It hits close to home for you, I'm sure, too. All right. Well, we're getting to that time where did they prep you that we would do a little rapid fire fun questions?
All right. If you could invite any one person to dinner, who would you invite?
Dead or alive?
Either one.
Ronald Reagan.
All right.
Good one. What would a perfect day look like for you?
Basically, I control my own time. That'd be a perfect day for me. Getting up when I want, being around who I want, and being able to go to a ball game when I want, and that'd just be my perfect day, just to be able to be around the people I want and go to having experiences I want to have experiences with.
All right. Well, this is related. You're waking up and you could have any one ability that maybe you don't have today. What would that be?
I think I'm developing it, but it's the power of focus. Being able to, that's the power of the genius, right? They can focus in. And that's the power I've always wanted. I have it spotty, but if I can wake up right now and say, from this point on, I can laser focus at any second in time, that's the power right there to be able to get things accomplished.
What time of the day do you carve out your me time?
It's usually 4:30 in the morning.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
4:30 in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, connects. What's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Yeah, I would say Hudson River. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of crap in the Hudson River. I don't know if y'all know that or not. And it goes in your mouth. Yeah, no, that's probably. I mean, that's something I would say drink, not eat. But yeah, there's food in there too. Unfortunately, there's things playing in the river. Yes,
it's a chunky river.
What's strange is
man.
for
Still got
for
the
some
smell
reason
on my nose, guys. Still got the smell on my nose.
I remember my father telling me that as a kid he would water ski in the Hudson River, but I don't know if that's real or not.
Rough water,
Right.
man.
Maybe
Rough
when he
water
was a
water
kid.
ski.
Yeah.
He's a hell of a man if he did that. All right.
All right, Dave. Well, the show's called Discover the Difference, so we always wrap up with 2 questions surrounding that topic. So you want to kick her off, Gabe?
Sure. This one is a reflective one. When you're reflecting back on your life and you want to give advice, now you're a mentor to your younger self. So, what would you tell your younger self right now?
I would tell my younger self to really be happy every day. Every day above ground is a great day. I think a lot. If I was young, when I was younger, I probably would dwell on a lot of things, and I would say, you know what? Every day above ground is a great day. Be happy. I think it's the advice I would give to my younger self.
I like that. So everybody has a key ingredient to their secret sauce. What is that key ingredient that makes you who you are?
I would say that the key ingredient I would have is the ability to take action. I don't ever leave anything without taking action. And so I think that's my secret sauce. And that's why I think it only happened that day on the river, on the plane crash, but be able to do what I've been able to accomplish is because I don't wait around. I always take an action. Every time I make a goal, I make immediate action. I think that is my power.
Love that.
I love that. Well, you have an amazing story, and you've inspired so many people, not just from, the miracle on the Hudson, but just the way you've lived your life and how you supported people along the way. Where can people find you that are listening here?
Well, thank you. I think go to my website, DaveSandersonSpeaks.com. I'm really proud. We just put my new website up a couple of weeks ago. I love for people to check it out. Plus, my books are there. Plus, I just issued my first issue of my new magazine, Moments Matter, which they can get a free copy if they go on my website. So check it out, DaveSandersonSpeaks.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Will do. Well, hey, thanks for coming on, Dave. We really appreciate your time. We're looking forward to telling your story to our listening audience.
Thank you very much. I love the baseballs in the back too. That's tremendous.
You had a baseball reference earlier. It sounds like you follow the sport, I assume.
I do. Ever since I was a bat boy for a day in 1967 for the CincinnatiReds. So yes.
Oh, that sounds like a dream come true right there. How'd that happen?
Oh, my mom entered me in a contest at Kroger, and I got selected to sit on the bench with Tommy Helms and Johnny Bench and Pete Rose, and I was like,
oh my gosh.
What, in the Crosley Field. Listen,
Wow.
oh, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I love the baseball stuff in the back. And part of my book, I actually talked about it's called The Pitch, the point in time that changes everything, right? And I use a baseball analogy about that pitch is coming, right? That's the point in time that changes everything. And you can use that the same way in your life.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's a ball for every team I've coached. And I didn't play, but fell in love with the sport and love coaching the kids.
Well, it looks like you got some teams back there, and congratulations. You're impacting the youth, and that's what's going to get this country through with the challenges we're having right now. Teaching these kids discipline and morals, keeping their mind right, being around the right peer groups.
Absolutely.
100%. What's the plaque that's right above the American Red Cross?
Looks like a sword.
I love it. It's actually it's actually a real Bowie knife that was been passed down through generations in my family. My dad gave it to me right before he passed away. So it's an actual Bowie knife. I think it's 80, 90 years old.
Wow. That's so cool.
Very cool. Well, I feel like we can keep talking for hours on end, but we might have to do a follow-up once you get the book fully launched and continue with the success.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thanks for your time. I'm really humbled and honored to be with you guys today. I look forward to hopefully further conversations.